Hi, little justice leaders. I am so excited for the conversation we are about to have. This has been a long time coming. I'm Shelby, in case you don't know. I'm the creator of Little Justice Leaders. We help schools, educators, and families build learning spaces rooted in justice and belonging. And today we have a very special guest. My friend Mel is a queer early intervention educator living and teaching in Australia. Mel is dedicated to social justice education, and I'm so excited that we're finally getting to sit down and chat. Welcome, Mel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to get into it. Obviously, you have so much expertise when it comes to social justice and education as an educator and having been an educator in many spaces. So, can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe your experience in education and how you got into education?
Yeah, so I've been teaching, like you said, for a long time now. I am a queer educator. My pronouns are she, her. I'm first generation. My parents are Cuban. I'm Cuban American. And I first got into teaching. Right away, when I was young, I knew I had a teacher that I was watching teach, and she was doing, I don't even remember the lesson. I was in fifth grade. And I remember thinking, I can do what you're doing. And as I grew up and went to high school and then consequently college, I just thought it was what I wanted to do. So that's sort of how I fell into education. I taught mainstream, so like your first grade. I've taught English as a second language for 10 years, and now I'm teaching special education or early intervention. In Australia, we call it ed support. I actually like that name a little bit better. It feels a bit more inclusive. And so that's sort of been my 20 plus years in this education space. And I think every position I've sort of had, I've had the opportunity be pushed outside of my comfort zone. And so that sort of fueled my wanting to create inclusive spaces for all students and helping me advocate for them.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that you were inspired from such a young age. Like when you just saw, teaching in action and you were like, yes, like that's what I want to do. That's what I can do. You clearly identified your skill set very early on. So that's awesome to hear. You talked a little bit about, creating inclusive spaces and how important that is to you. Why is it so important to you to think about, social justice in teaching and education?
So initially, when I fell into the social justice space, it was because of my own identities. So I was, as much as I look like a white presenting, and I am white Hispanic person. I also have a queer identity, which is outside the mainstream. I grew up in Miami, Florida. And as soon as I moved away from Miami, Florida, I was other. I wasn't the mainstream. So as much as I may look like the mainstream, I'm not in many spaces. And I was talking with a very dear friend, Tamara Russell from Mrs. Russell's Room. And it was like this big aha moment for me. Gone to a conference, and Tamara was there, and Naomi O'Brien was there. And we were going to the sessions and whatnot. And we were talking about just identities. This was way before the social justice was really big online, before anybody was woke. It was like a light bulb moment for me. Before that, my Instagram was like everybody wanted to be cute and what new craft were we doing that week? And then I noticed slowly after having conversations with them that what the important things I wanted to share were less about what cute thing we're doing and more about how to create a space for all students to feel welcome.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that it was an in-person connection. So I think
Yeah.
so often nowadays we don't always have that. And because so many of us are spread around the world, like doing this work, and it's hard to find community. So I love that you were able to find that community and build your voice and build, what you wanted to say in the world. So that's awesome. You mentioned that you do ed support, which I love that language as well in Australia. So you focus a lot on supporting students with disabilities, specifically in the mainstream classroom and creating accommodations for students. So can you tell us like just a little bit about how you do that and maybe how other teachers can start to think about creating more inclusive and accessible spaces?
Right. So I have some preschool and kindergarten age students, so 4 and 5-year olds. And it's a 2-year program, school readiness skills. So that when they do go into a mainstream environment, they already have the skills to play with their friends or engage in the lesson. And so I do a lot of work with students who have limited verbal or are nonverbal. Most of my students will have an autism diagnosis or some sort of global developmental delay. Anybody that comes through my door has some sort of difficulty. So these kids come through the door and they struggle to communicate with us. They have maladaptive behaviors. And so what we do is we work on helping them understand how to communicate with us. We use lots of visuals. We'll use a dedicated talker or a low-tech pod book. But mainly what I do is create a place where they feel happy to come to every day. So they want to engage with school. We don't want students to have a negative view of school so that then they don't want to come, they stop engaging, and then it gets much harder as they get older. So I always think about when I taught English as a second language, my coaches used to always say, these things are great for all kids, but they're non-negotiable for our kids. We need to do these things for our students learning English as an additional language. And I think about that a lot in my ed support space. So me using visuals in the classroom, it's going to benefit everybody. Having a visual schedule on the board, all kids will benefit for it. But it is absolutely necessary for the students who need to know what's coming next. And so I always think about this example in my head, wheelchair parking. It's great for any of us to get parking really close to wherever we're going, but it's absolutely necessary for people in a wheelchair to have parking that is close to where they're going. So having a bit of a mind shift and thinking, all right, what is it that this student is going through and how can I make this more accessible to them has been really helpful to me in both the ed support space and when I taught ELL in the States. It just being able to have that compassion and able to say, okay, this is how I can help you access this is really the big thing.
Absolutely. And what really like strikes me about this, like you said, is this is good for all kids, right? So
Mhm.
any classroom teacher can think about, what are some things I can do to make this space more accessible? Those things that you're doing are going to help all of your students. It is not, just for students with disabilities or just for students with certain needs in the classroom. It's going to benefit the entire space and all of the students when you have visuals, when you create a space where every student feels welcome, when you create a space where every student's happy to be there, like that's just beneficial for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just like good education practice. So I love that. So for educators listening, if you teach in a mainstream classroom, these small tweaks are just good practice and it's going to be good for everyone.
It's really uncomfortable at the beginning because you're
Yeah,
having to do something new. So when I first had like my kids all have their own visual schedules. It was really, they lost them. They were everywhere all
yeah,
over the class. We lost all the pictures
of
and
course.
there's 100 different ways to do visual schedules, but my kids really responded to the little pictures on the Velcro and whatnot. And it was really hard to sort of stop and refer to them constantly because it just wasn't part of my natural practice.
Hmm.
But I knew that even if it was hard for me, I wanted to do it for my students because I could see how like it decreased their behaviors or it decreased their anxiousness about what was going to happen next. So it was just sort of sticking with it. And now it's just part of every day. So I would say whatever it is that we're going to put in place, whatever accommodation that we're going to put in place, because I couldn't possibly go over all of them. The accommodations
Right.
can be tiny or huge. Whatever it is, it's just knowing it's going to be uncomfortable, but sticking with it. It's sort of like building a new habit. It takes
Yeah.
28 days to build a new habit. Do it for 28 days and see if it's still as difficult after those 28 days and if you've seen an improvement. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, what you just said kind of applies to any changes you're going to make to create a more inclusive, welcoming, just space. So obviously at Little Justice Leaders, we're always talking about social justice and education. And you're an educator who's been engaged in the social justice world of education for a really long time and someone I've looked up to as a social justice educator. But I think for many people, it can be very hard to picture like, what does that actually look like in a classroom? What does it mean to be a social justice educator? And of course, there's a million ways it can look, but can you give us some examples of what social justice education can look like in your classroom?
I think it can be a bit difficult to picture because it can look many different ways. And sometimes it isn't really big and flashy. It's not this one lesson you do. It's sort of like little embedded practices every day. So for me, particularly because I have really young children, I do a lot of my social justice work through literacy, through reading books and providing different opportunities to see different cultures and different family structures, or just that opportunity to see something other than them, or on the flip side to see themselves in a book. So the other thing that I find to be really helpful to build social justice with young children is helping them advocate for themselves and their friends. So simply just teaching them to say, stop, I don't like that, or that hurt my feelings. That is sort of the groundwork for being able to later, when they're in year 5, to be able to say, hey, that wasn't okay. Like, that's not appropriate, or that was offensive. Right. So to me, those two things are sort of the big things. And I do them with really simple lessons and questions, just having them just stopping during the book and say, oh, how did they feel? Why do you think it made them feel that way? What could they have done differently? Let's see what happens in the rest of the book. So just sort of those little things, and being able to just provide spaces for them to feel safe to question is another big thing. So one of the things I always get is, particularly little kids, is how come you have short hair? Only boys have short hair. And I always get to say, well, why do you think that? And most of the time it's because they've not had a woman with short hair in their lives before. I get it a lot less now than I did 20 years ago when I started teaching, but it's just like asking the question, seeing where they're coming from, and then you can sort of push back a little bit and say, well, actually, I remember quite a few years ago, I was a student that was quite adamant about, like, no, girls have long hair, boys have short hair. And so then I pulled up just Google images of different celebrities with short hair and long hair, and some boys that had long hair and some girls that had short hair. And just that in itself sort of opened up the world to them. So it's little things like that. Just a reminder that it doesn't, the big lessons are great. They're actually really important to have as well. But the everyday practice of it is just going to be like small little things. It's not going to be earth shattering every day.
Absolutely. And I think, those little things sometimes stick with us longer, right? Because they're just constantly reinforced. Those were such good examples, such like tangible examples of, real things that students say, and a very specific way to be able to respond and open their world a little bit. You also, Mel, just really like laid out the connection between social emotional learning and emotional development and social justice, which I think is something people kind of struggle to figure out like how those pieces fit together. And just the way you talked about like how emotional awareness and social awareness can, lead to self-advocacy and advocacy for others and speaking up for what's right. Like that was just a beautiful like way of explaining it all. So thank you for that. So a lot of folks in our community, want to be involved in justice work. Maybe they're just starting out as a teacher, or, they have young kids as a parent or caregiver, or maybe, they've been doing this for a while, but they want to start bringing justice more intentionally into the space. What advice do you have for teachers who are just starting out on this journey to become social justice educators? Or, a lot of this advice also applies to caregivers too.
Yeah. So I think initially I would say look to other accounts, to other people that you know are doing the work, and sort of just watch what they're doing for a bit. And then try to embed little things that you see that are feasible for you, because everybody's environment's different, especially in this political climate. We don't know it's sort of some gray area at the moment. So you want to be able to watch, learn, sort of understand that it's not about us, but also about us at the same time, right? So it's about what we can do, but it's not about centering ourselves. Sort of like when we're thinking about our kids and the accommodations, it's not about what we can and can't do, it's about what the student needs, right? So listening, watching, I would say seek out other accounts like Little Justice Leaders. I used to love the packs and the stuff you guys used to put out because it was so amazing to be able to just say, oh, I don't know where to start with this topic. And then you go there. Just listening and seeking out others that are doing this work would be a great starting place. And then, if particularly with caregivers or teachers as well, finding books that are not the usual typical books. I mean, just last week I was in a children's bookstore and I was picking up a book. So in Australia, our First Nations people, our Aboriginal people have different communities. Sort of, it reminds me a lot of how Native American communities have their own language and they're all separate from one another. And the First Nations people where I am, in the state I am, are the Noongar people, and particularly the Menang people here where I live. So I saw a first language book in Noongar language, so I picked that up. That's gonna go in my library. And everybody's always really worried about, "Oh, I'm gonna say the word wrong." No one's gonna know. It doesn't matter, and you know what? If you say it wrong, they're just gonna be grateful that you tried. So, like, it's just being exposing them to, like, other languages. "Oh, this is different. Oh, let's talk about the people from this land. Let's talk about their history." And it just sort of evolves from there. So,
Absolutely. Books are a great way to start for caregivers and for educators. Like just even having it on the shelf is
yes.
an opportunity for a young person to either see themselves and their family represented or see something that's different from them, like you said. So that's wonderful. I think just such good advice all around. Like listen, learn, pay attention to what other folks are doing. If you don't have a community in person, find that community online. So yeah, I think really good places to start. So thank you. And I think one other thing you said, Mel, that I think we gloss over sometimes and it's so important. You said, do what you can depending on your context, right? We all have a different context depending on how much support we have from admin or from our community, what type of community we're in, who the parents and caregivers and families of our students are. All of those things matter, right? We all want to speak up and we all want to do all the things, and we have to work within the constraints we're in. So I think not beating ourselves up over what we can't do, but thinking really deeply about what can I do in this space.
I know in some places you can't necessarily bring in books due
Mhm.
to particular bands,
Yep.
right? But what you can do is you can curate a list of books and send that home to the parent. And
Mhm.
then if the parents are willing, they can get those books. So you may not be allowed to have them in your classroom, but you can certainly suggest them.
Yeah.
And then it's up to that caregiver or person in the child's life to be able to pull those in if they're willing to do the work as well. So it's small things.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I love that example. Like just a little workaround of I can't do that. So what can I do? Right. This conversation has been so good. I know that folks are going to be walking away with really tangible ideas of, what they can do, where they can start, how they can push their practice further. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights. Is there a way that our community can find your work and support you?
So I am mainly on Instagram nowadays, and I'm just at K1ELL. So you can
Perfect.
find me there, please.
Wonderful. We love it. I will go ahead and link that below so folks can find it easily. So thank you again, Mel. Those of you out there, if you care about social justice and education, be sure to subscribe to our channel and join the Little Justice Leaders community. I will link some ways for you to get involved with our work and get access to some of our resources if you're interested. Otherwise, Mel, thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad we had this conversation.